A meteor collision changed everything. From that day on, strange events began to unfold, and the awakened started to appear all over the globe. But here's the twist. They've been around since the beginning. They just needed a little push to wake up. In our story, we focus on our main character, who finds himself injured near the meteor crash site. But what's really interesting is the crystal that's mysteriously formed on his head. This crystal might just hold some secrets about the awakened. Fast forward a few months, and things are getting darker in Meteor District 3 of Aegis, a new coastal city. There's been a chilling series of disappearances. 30 people vanished in just a month, and sadly, 10 of them were found dead, all with two unsettling things in common. They had bite marks on their necks, and they were completely drained of blood. The police are on high alert, trying to catch the creature behind these gruesome acts, a being known only as Ghost. Whenever they shoot at him, it barely makes a dent because he regenerates way too fast. In a single swift motion, Ghost wipes out an entire team of officers. In the midst of all this chaos, Ghost captures a woman and takes her into his hideout. There, she discovers a horrific sight. Humans trapped inside experiment capsules, all infected. Just when she thinks she might escape, Ghost uses his powers, and with a horrifying twist, he turns her into his doll. Now, the sergeant of the police force learns that his alpha team has been taken down by Ghost. Realizing he's outmatched, he decides to bring in some serious backup. Who does he call? None other than our main character, Red, who's ready to take on the monster that's terrorizing the city. Red is gearing up to face off against Ghost, but before he does, he reaches out to his partner, Elda. Now, even though they're supposed to be a team, Red doesn't quite see Elda as a partner. He thinks of her more like his personal blood supply. He asks Elda how much blood she's managed to collect so far, and she says about 15%. But don't worry, she assures him she'll get the rest in time. It's clear she's got his back, even if he doesn't fully appreciate it. Red steps into the building where Ghost is hiding, and guess what? The girl Ghost had taken hostage approaches him. Just as Red is processing this, Ghost sneaks up behind her, asking Red what he thinks of his new doll. Without wasting a second, Red pulls out his gun and starts shooting at Ghost. Ghost regenerates way too fast for regular bullets to do any real damage. But Red isn't just any human either. He uses his blood ability to cover his hand with his own blood, making it super strong. With a powerful lunge, he scratches Ghost's face. But hold on, something's off. Ghost notices that his wound isn't healing. Just then, an explosion rocks the building, and Red finds himself surrounded by a horde of infected humans, zombies created from Ghost's victims who were drained of blood. The real battle begins. Red is ready to unleash his powers. He channels his ability, and suddenly, glowing blood crystals appear on both his hands. From that blood, he creates two blood guns and starts firing at the infected humans lunging at him. Ghost is watching all this unfold, and he's intrigued. He wants that blood crystal for himself, and he senses that Red has even more tricks up his sleeve. So, instead of rushing in, Ghost decides to take his time and play it smart. But the remaining infected aren't out of the game yet. They begin using their own blood abilities, turning the fight into chaos. Red, not backing down, uses his ability called Bloodshot. He fires it at the ground, creating a massive explosion of blood that wipes out the remaining infected. In midair, Red takes aim at Ghost, preparing to launch another Bloodshot. But Ghost is ready for him. He uses his own abilities to create two deadly swords and starts slashing at everything around him. With a swift move, Ghost gains the upper hand, and just like that, Red loses the battle. Ghost's appearance changes dramatically. A crystal horn manifests from his forehead, and he explains that this horn is proof of his evolution, a symbol of his newfound power. Red was running low on blood and can't conjure up any weapons. But despite the dire situation, he's keeping a smile on his face. Just then, his partner Elda swoops in to save the day. Using her ability, she manifests a chilling blast and quickly freezes Ghost. But Ghost isn't done yet. He easily breaks free and charges at Elda. Luckily, she's quick on her feet and dodges his attack by jumping into the air. In a brave move, she hands over her blood to Red, but this makes her vulnerable. Ghost tries to strike her down, but Red steps in just in time. Using his powers, he cuts Ghost's hand, saving Elda from harm. Red injects himself with Elda's blood, giving him a much-needed boost. Ghost regenerates his hand almost instantly and enters a frenzy state. He transforms into his ultimate form and goes for Red with a powerful strike. Red has his own crystal horn now. He channels its power to manifest a gigantic blood hand, and with one mighty blow, he defeats Ghost once and for all. After the battle, Red and Elda head back to the Shadow Team's control center. Elda hands over Ghost's blood crystal to the doctor, but Red isn't celebrating. Instead, he retreats to the isolation ward in the basement, looking downcast. He's holding an engagement ring and starts to reflect on everything. He smiles but then notes that this so-called evolution in power feels more like a curse. In front of him is an infected woman trapped inside a capsule, and it's clear that Red has a lot on his mind. All right, everyone, let's rewind a bit and take a trip back in time. Before that fateful meteor collision, our hero, Red, is in a rush because he's late for a meeting with his girlfriend, Jean. He finally makes it to the top of a building where Jean is waiting, and boy, is she looking forward to seeing him. He quickly apologizes for being late. Turns out a group of customers came in at the last minute and held him up. But Jean is not just here for his apology. She's expecting a present, especially since he kept her waiting for 3 whole hours. So, what does Red do? He starts rummaging through the grass nearby and, in a sweet gesture, crafts her a beautiful flower ring. Jean pretends to be angry at first, but Red knows her too well. He realizes that when she's genuinely mad, she turns into a witch. But to his relief, Jean isn't really upset at all. She kisses him and tells him how much she loves the flower ring. Red pulls her into a warm hug, promising to bring her something really special next time. As they embrace, the sun starts to set, casting a gorgeous glow over the city. Let's shift gears and head to the coastal city of Aegis, where things are getting intense. 7 years ago, a meteor was discovered here, one that had fallen long before. Scientists determined it was incredibly valuable, which led NASA and the Zion Corporation to create this new city dedicated to studying and using its resources. Strange and mysterious things are happening in Aegis that defy human understanding. In the midst of this chaos, we see a woman fighting against a blood manipulator while carrying her baby. The blood manipulator makes it clear that if she tries to run away, she won't live for much longer. It turns out that the woman and her daughter are not just ordinary humans. The little girl is suffering from a fever, and in a desperate moment, the mother pleads with their pursuer to let them go. The man taunts her with a crystal of blood, promising to cure her daughter if she follows his plan. But the mother sees through his lies and decides to use her ability to wrap herself and her daughter, allowing them to escape the scene. However, she's injured and leaves behind traces of her blood, which leads the man and his friend to track them down. We switch back to Red, who is in a much lighter situation. He's making breakfast for his girlfriend, Jean, who just woke up. She rewards him with a sweet hug and reminds him not to forget about their meeting later that day. Jean is pregnant, and she's been waiting to share this news with Red during their meeting. Back with the mother and daughter, they manage to flee a good distance, but the mother needs to rest due to her injuries. Suddenly, her daughter screams in pain as her arm starts to petrify, as the petrification begins to spread across her body. In a brave and desperate move, the mother quickly gives her daughter some of her own blood to stop the spread. Dr. Sarah from NASA was on the line, delivering some shocking news. A meteor is heading toward Earth and can now be seen with the naked eye. Red is at his bar, holding the engagement ring, eager to present it to Jean during their meeting. Suddenly, someone walks into the bar, and Red goes to check who it is. To his shock, it's the pursuer who has been chasing the woman and her daughter. The pursuer demands to know where the white-haired woman is. Red calmly tells him that smoking isn't allowed in the bar. But the pursuer isn't deterred. With a sinister grin, he uses his ability called the Blood Eye, trying to gain the upper hand. However, Red remains unaffected. Seeing that his attack has failed, the pursuer decides to go for the kill. The pursuer's friend quickly steps in, stopping him from attacking Red. He points out that with so many witnesses around, they can't afford to kill Red in broad daylight. He reminds the pursuer that the princess wants them to handle things quietly. Realizing this is about the princess's orders, The pursuer reluctantly leaves with his friend. After they leave, Red goes inside to check on the woman and her daughter. He offers the mother some soup and the little girl a hamburger to help them feel better. As the mother tends to her daughter, she notices that the petrification has now spread to the girl's spine. This revelation drives her determination to get the cure from the pursuer, no matter the cost. Gathering her courage, she decides to leave her daughter in Red's care for a while as she goes to retrieve the cure. Meanwhile, the pursuer and his friend are pleased with the news that the meteor is about to land on Earth. They know it's connected to the crystal blood they possess, and this could change everything for them. Mina and her friend were out taking photos of the meteor that was falling, excited to capture the moment. As they wandered further, they found themselves in an empty alley. Suddenly, the pursuer emerged from the darkness and kidnapped both of them. He used the blood crystal to drain all the blood from Mina, and then he did the same to her friend. With this chilling act, the blood crystal had now absorbed the blood of 100 people. The preparations for the ritual were complete. The pursuer and his friend were discussing their next move when suddenly, the mother appeared and tried to snatch the blood crystal from the pursuer. In response, he smashed the ground, creating an explosion around them. Using her ability to warp, the mother managed to escape the blast. She quickly realized there was a barrier around them, making it invisible to the outside world. The pursuer activated his blood eye and started firing blood lasers at her. She skillfully dodged each shot, bending her head to avoid being hit. But he got close and managed to land a blow. Thankfully, she used her wrapping ability to minimize the damage. The pursuer reminded the mother of their deal. If she helped them, they would cure her child. But she had no idea it involved the deaths of others. Determined to take her child's fate into her own hands, she seized the blood crystal from him. As she tried to escape, the crystal weakened her. The pursuer caught up to her, explaining that the blood crystal was more than just a meteor shard. It granted both life and death. With the mother in their grasp, they believed they had obtained the key to their plans. Back with Red and the little girl, they stepped outside and immediately spotted the pursuer and his friend carrying her mother away. Red quickly found the old man near his store and left the little girl in his care while he confronted the pursuer. Armed with a fire extinguisher, Red charged at the pursuer, kicking him hard on the head. He then launched the fire extinguisher, creating a massive cloud of smoke that filled the area. Using the confusion to his advantage, Red jumped into their car and sped away. When the mother asked Red about her child, he assured her that she was fine. She urged him to get as far away as possible, directing him to a place called Sky Park. On the road, Red attempted to call Jean, but the meteor interference made it impossible to reach her. The mother then apologized to Red for using him to save her child. She revealed that her body held a key capable of annihilating humans, and the most urgent news was that the meteor was following her. Red was confused by her words until she showed him the blood crystal fused in her chest. Suddenly, the crystal began to target Red, trying to suck his blood. The mother urged him to get as far away from her as possible. When Red exited the car, he noticed that the meteor was heading straight for the tall building where Jean was. Without a second thought, he sprinted toward the building. Upon reaching the top, he found Jean ready to tell him something important. She was pregnant. But before she could finish her sentence, the meteor struck, obliterating the entire area. And so, this is when everything truly began. The entire area was thrown into chaos. Dr. Sarah and her team arrived on the scene and quickly spotted the meteor hovering near Red, along with the strange crystallization protruding from his head. Sarah instructed her allies to take Red with them. When Red finally woke up, he found himself in a hospital room connected to bizarre devices supplying him with blood. He pulled the blood needles from his arms and looked around in shock. Before him was a massive hole, a result of someone's attack, and lying near it was the lifeless body of a doctor. Determined to find someone, Red moved forward but was met only with the dead bodies of SWAT team members scattered around. He checked the room next door, only to find more corpses. Realizing he needed to reach the central hall to exit the hospital, he headed for the parking lot. As he made his way to the main exit, he was met with a scene of utter chaos outside. Red was focused on finding Jean when he noticed cars above him teetering on the edge of collapse. He quickly left the area, searching for another exit. As he walked down the hallway, he spotted some survivors who were being attacked by infected humans. Just then, Rebecca, one of the nurses, was on the brink of being overwhelmed when her friend Sue intervened and saved her. The infected began to chase them, but Red acted fast, dragging both women into a nearby room to escape. Sue thanked Red for his help, but Rebecca was losing her grip on reality, panicking at the chaos surrounding them. She lunged at Red, demanding he take responsibility for their safety. In a moment of clarity, Sue slapped Rebecca to bring her back to her senses, calming her down. Red emphasized the need to find a way outside. Sue remembered a passage and urged them to follow her. Unbeknownst to them, however, Rebecca had been scratched by an infected earlier, and it was only a matter of time before she would turn into one of them. Following Sue, Red and Rebecca reached an old emergency exit. Sue explained that if they could get to the roof, they might find a way outside. However, they quickly noticed a group of infected humans nearby. Even the tiniest sound could draw them in. As they moved quietly, Red and Sue found a common bond. They both had someone they needed to protect. For Sue, it was her daughter, and for Red, it was his girlfriend, Jan. Suddenly, Sue, who had been trying to stay strong for Rebecca, broke down in tears. Red urged her to focus on getting back to their families. Just as they were trying to find hope, Rebecca began to transform into one of the infected. In a horrifying moment, she lunged at Sue and bit her neck, starting to suck her blood. Red quickly tried to push Rebecca away, but she sent him flying with a powerful hit. The noise attracted other infected nearby, who started closing in on them. In a frenzy, Rebecca was lost in a state of pleasure, draining Sue's blood. Just when it seemed like Rebecca was about to take even more, Sue managed to shoot her in the head. However, even after that, Rebecca somehow rose again, ready to attack Sue. The situation grew dire as the other infected swarmed toward them, leaving Red and Sue in a fight for their lives. The infected horde overwhelmed Red, throwing him to the ground. Luckily, he managed to grab onto a metal bar, saving himself from falling further. Meanwhile, Sue fell onto a nearby mattress just as the infected started closing in on her. She quickly drew her gun and shot at any infected that got too close. Seeing the danger Sue was in, Red grabbed the hose connected to the fire extinguisher and used it to swing down to her. Just as Rebecca was about to drain Sue of her blood, Red reached her and swung them both to safety on the other side. But they weren't out of danger yet. The horde of infected was right behind them, closing in fast. The scene shifted to two mysterious figures, neither of whom were human. Hitch was dragging Misty along like a puppet, relying on her ability to smell blood from a distance as they searched for Master Zod. Hitch seemed bored with the mission, but Misty reminded him that Zod had ordered them to take it seriously. This angered Hitch, and he choked Misty, warning her not to speak to him like that again. Suddenly, a horde of infected lunged at them. Without hesitation, Hitch used his blood ability to conjure a bloody gun, and with a single shot, he wiped out the entire horde instantly. As they moved deeper into the building, they reached the room where Red had been held captive. To their shock, they discovered that Master Zod was dead. Misty examined the blood around and determined that Zod had been killed with a blood weapon. Hitch was intrigued, especially since Zod, an immortal, had somehow been unable to regenerate this time. He asked Misty about the blood crystal, and she sensed it nearby. With the case now involving both a blood crystal and a blood weapon, Hitch couldn't hide his excitement. A sinister smile crept across his face as he looked forward to starting this hunt. Red and Sue were on the run from the horde of infected as they reached the central hall. Unfortunately, the exit was blocked, and Sue's infection was spreading rapidly. With no other option, they burst into the central hall and tried to shut the door, but it wouldn't latch. They held it shut with their bodies as Rebecca appeared, demanding Sue give her the blood within her. Sue, knowing her time was short, urged Red to leave without her. She reminisced about her daughter, recalling the last time they spoke, when her daughter said she wanted to see the meteor. Overwhelmed with emotion, Sue began to cry, regretting that she hadn't told her daughter she loved her more often. Red shouted that her daughter was still alive, and that he had been next to the meteor himself. Touched by his words, Sue told Red he was truly a kind person. In a heartbreaking moment, She pushed Red away and shut the door behind her. The infected immediately swarmed her, biting at her body, and soon their attention turned toward Red. After draining Sue's blood, the infected broke through the door and started chasing Red. With nowhere to run, Red sprinted toward a nearby structure piled high with destroyed cars. Just as one of the infected lunged at him, he grabbed a door from one of the cars and used it as a makeshift shield. But the horde quickly surrounded him, trapping him with no escape in sight. Realizing the structure behind him was about to collapse, Red made a desperate decision. He began to ram his head against the crumbling wall, even though it hurt. As he did, something incredible happened. The crystal blood embedded in his head began to glow. With a powerful surge, the cars on the structure started to topple over, crushing the infected beneath them. The force was so intense that it shattered the ground, sending both Red and the horde tumbling into the darkness below. As Michael approached him with a weapon ready to shoot, Red pleaded for help. The petrification from the crystal blood in his head began to spread. Michael was taken aback. He remembered being there with Dr. Sarah when the meteor fell near Red. Let's rewind to the day of the meteor collision. Michael had marveled at the miracle of Red's survival, despite his condition. Dr. Sarah decided to bring Red with them for treatment, and they rushed him to the hospital. Inside the emergency room, police officers were stationed to secure the area. Suddenly, a figure approached them, someone who looked anything but human. As the officers prepared to shoot, the non-human being unleashed his blood ability, slicing through their guns and taking out several officers. The last soldier standing was bitten by this creature, transforming him into a ghoul right before their eyes. Red was in a critical condition, his blood pressure dangerously low. But thanks to the efforts of Sarah and Michael, they managed to stop the bleeding on his arm. Elda stood nearby, anxiously watching the situation unfold. The crystal blood on Red's forehead was pulsating with a massive amount of energy, too much for his body to handle. If they didn't relieve that energy soon, Red's life would be in serious jeopardy. Suddenly, they learned that they were under attack. The non-human assailant had transformed all the police guards into ghouls, and his name was Master Zod. He wanted the blood crystal from Red, but Sarah had different plans. She intended to use powerful relics, pieces from a vampire's limbs, to save Red. Sarah explained to Michael that they were going to transplant Pienso and Zisto into Red. This wasn't the first time she attempted such an operation. In the past, all her attempts had ended in failure. But now, Red was their last hope. Turning to Elda, Sarah asked her to buy them some time. Elda warned them that she could only hold off the attacker for 10 minutes. With that, she bravely stepped forward to face Master Zod, while Sarah and Michael prepared to begin the operation on Red. While Red's fate hung in the balance, Rebecca and Sue were busy attending to the patients nearby. Suddenly, the ghouls, led by Zod, swarmed into the area. Zod shouted orders for the ghouls to kill all the humans. Just then, Elda rushed onto the scene, using her rapping ability to dash toward Zod. But Zod was quick. He activated his blood ability and sliced through the air, turning Elda into pieces mid-jump. However, Elda wasn't finished yet. She utilized her second ability, freezing herself and gathering her body back together. Not backing down, she countered by trying to freeze Zod, but he broke free with ease and attempted to slice her again. Elda dashed backward, narrowly avoiding the attacks. As the ghouls lunged at her, she jumped and managed to freeze a few of them. But there were just too many. She couldn't freeze them all. Furious, Zod created a blood weapon, blood scythes, and lunged at Elda. She tried to wrap away to escape, but humans were behind her, and she couldn't leave them to die. With no other option, Elda empowered her hand with ice to block Zod's attack. She successfully saved the people, but Zod quickly grabbed her hand, immobilizing her. As the humans fled, the ghouls blocked their path, mercilessly killing them. Elda struggled to wrap away, but Zod's grip was too strong. His hands were special and prevented her from using her abilities, but Elda refused to give up. In a desperate move, she cut off her own hand to escape his grasp. Using her wrap ability, Elda returned to Sarah and Michael, breathless. "How's the operation on Red?" she asked anxiously. Sarah's response hit her hard. It failed. Red is dead. Just then, Zod caught up to them, ready to take them all down. Elda realized she couldn't wrap away with both Sarah and Michael in her state. But Michael wasn't about to let them fall. He quickly threw a smoke grenade, creating a thick cloud that obscured Zod's vision. Seizing the opportunity, Elda grabbed Sarah, and they dashed away. Meanwhile, Michael leaped over the desk, snatched a gun, and made a daring escape through the garbage chute. Zod was ready to chase after Michael when he caught sight of the blood crystal inside Red's body. Curiosity got the better of him, and he reached out to touch it. In an instant, the crystal unleashed a powerful surge, destroying Zod's blood weapons and pushing him back. Red wasn't dead at all. Even unconscious, a sinister smile crept across his face. Thanks to the transplanted hands, he summoned multiple blood weapons. With a single blast, he obliterated Zod, the attack tearing through everything in its path. Now we finally understand how Red survived and how Zod met his end. Back in the present, Michael noticed something alarming. Red was petrifying. Michael helped Red to his feet, and they started moving forward. Little did they know, Rebecca was still alive. She had been using her ability to absorb other ghouls, making herself stronger in the process. As they reached an elevator, they took a moment to catch their breath. But Red's petrification was spreading rapidly, and Michael knew they couldn't let him die. If they did, they would lose the powerful relics transplanted into him. Suddenly, the blood crystal on Red's forehead began to absorb his blood. Realizing the urgency of the situation, Michael injured himself to provide his blood to Red. As the blood entered Red's mouth, he became more furious, craving even more power. Red lunged at Michael, biting his hand and absorbing more blood. In a panic, Michael reached for his bag and used a coagulant to stab Red, hoping to calm the chaotic blood crystal within him. But now, with the bite, Michael was also at risk of turning into a ghoul. Fortunately, he had more coagulants on hand. He quickly used one on himself, slowing the petrification. In a moment of rage, he grabbed his gun, ready to kill Red, but he managed to control himself. After all, Red was their only hope. As Michael felt the petrification spreading again, he knew time was running out. He began to strategize their next move. Behind them, Rebecca had absorbed multiple ghouls and was closing in fast. Michael was in a tense situation, quickly setting up C4 explosives around the subway, just in case things went south. Suddenly, Red regained consciousness and found Michael aiming a gun at him. Michael was furious because of the bite, but Red didn't remember that. He was trying to bypass the elevator system, a task that was taking longer than expected. Red's mind was foggy. He couldn't recall much from the operation. The only clear memory he had was of Michael cutting his leg during the procedure. Tensions were high as they faced an uncertain future, both aware that time was running out. Michael explained to Red that there was a blood crystal attached to his head and warned him about its power. The more Red used it, the less human he would become. Confused and frustrated, Red confronted Michael, demanding to know why they performed the operation on him. Michael replied that they didn't really know. They just tried their best to save his life. Just as Red was about to ask about his girlfriend Jean, the ground began to shake. Through the laptop, Michael saw that the vampires were getting closer. The petrification started spreading through Michael's body again, adding to the urgency of their situation. Michael quickly bypassed the firewall and opened the elevator. Red stepped inside first, but Michael stayed back, knowing he couldn't survive. The petrification in his body was too far gone. He handed Red a bag filled with coagulants and warned him not to misuse the blood crystal's power. If the petrification started spreading, Red could use one of the coagulants to slow it down. Michael made it clear that Red had to survive and find Sarah. He also shared that he arrived 30 minutes later than Sarah when the meteor fell, so she might know something about Jean. With that, the elevator began its ascent to the first floor. Hitch and Misty were closing in on Michael, demanding to know the whereabouts of the blood crystal. Misty turned to Hitch, saying the scent of the blood crystal had vanished. In a desperate move, Michael tried to shoot at Hitch, but he was too quick, firing his blood weapon and blasting off Michael's arm. Hitch, undeterred, pressed him again about the crystal, but Michael stood firm, refusing to give in. Frustrated, Hitch shot Michael's leg off next. He wanted to torture Michael piece by piece until he revealed the location of the crystal. Despite the pain, Michael found some dark humor in the situation. He pointed out that soon, all the vampires would realize just how terrifying humans could be. Then, with a sly grin, he grabbed the remote controller and activated all the C4 explosives he had planted earlier. The resulting explosion rocked the area, sending shockwaves through the building. But luckily, the elevator opened just in time for Red to escape the blast. As he stepped into the sunlight, relief washed over him, but that peace was short-lived. A tentacle shot out from the shadows, grabbing him and slamming him into the ground. Red struggled as the tentacle began to drag him away. In a desperate move, he clung to a piece of metal, using it for leverage. From Michael's bag, he pulled out the gun and shot at the tentacle, hoping to free himself. But just as he thought he was getting the upper hand, another tentacle appeared and knocked the gun from his hand. What Red faced was a terrifying sight. Rebecca, transformed and infused with the power of multiple ghouls, including Sue. This was not the same Rebecca he once knew. She had become something far more dangerous. As all the ghouls inside Rebecca screamed for Red's blood, he fought to reach the gun again. Desperation clawed at him as he realized he was at the end of his rope. Memories of Jean flooded his mind, reminding him of everything he had to lose. But just when he thought it was over, Red's transplanted hand tapped into its power. With a surge of energy, he created a bloody weapon. With one shot, he took down Rebecca and the ghouls inside her. It was a fierce victory, but the victory came with a price. The petrification began spreading from his arm. He quickly grabbed the coagulant from Michael's bag and injected himself to slow it down. When Red finally staggered outside, chaos greeted him. Buildings lay in ruins, and ghouls roamed the streets. Red ducked behind a wall, hiding from the ghouls as he struggled with his thoughts. Should he trust Sarah? After all, she was the one who turned him into this creature. Memories of Jean flooded back, reminding him of how she used to make his coffee just right. No cream, 2 spoons of sugar, just the way he liked it. His home was only a block away, but he needed a weapon to get there safely. The idea of creating another bloody weapon crossed his mind, but he hesitated. He knew it was dangerous and didn't want to risk losing control again. So, he stayed put, contemplating his next move as the chaos of the streets echoed around him. Red made a break for the building, hoping to find a safe spot from the ghouls. As he touched the door handle, he felt something strange happen. His hand absorbed some metal from it, causing the handle to drop to the ground with a clatter. The sound echoed, and the ghouls immediately shifted their attention toward him, rushing inside. He ducked behind a nearby car, but it didn't take long for the ghouls to surround him. In a panic, Red touched the car, and again, his hand absorbed metal. This time, the ghouls noticed him. 2 lunged at him, but he quickly grabbed a wooden stick and swung at one, knocking it down. The other ghoul charged, but Red dodged, using his weight to bring it crashing to the ground. He finished both of them off with the stick. As he caught his breath, he wondered why the wooden stick hadn't been absorbed by his hand. Curious, he picked up a fork lying on the ground. To his surprise, his hand absorbed it instantly. So, it seemed his hand only reacted to metal. This realization was a small victory in a chaotic world, but Red knew he needed to think quickly if he wanted to survive. More ghouls poured into the building, their snarls echoing as they chased Red. Panic surged through him. There was nowhere to escape. One of the ghouls lunged, crashing him against the wall. Red barely managed to dodge the next attack, but a sharp scratch marked his arm as another ghoul struck. He felt his strength fading. He was at his limit. With no other choice, he tapped into his blood ability. It surged through him, and he manifested his gun. He knew this was his chance. Red steadied himself and aimed. With a single shot, he fired, hoping to break through the horde and find a way out. As the ghouls charged in, Red opened fire, taking them down one by one. He felt victorious, but quickly realized something alarming. With every shot he fired, the blood crystal inside him was draining his blood. There was no time to rest. More ghouls rushed forward. Suddenly, his hand glowed and conjured the metal he had absorbed from the car, forming a shield. Red felt a surge of hope as he expected his other hand to create a powerful weapon. Instead, it only produced the fork he had absorbed earlier. Just as one of the ghouls lunged to bite him, his hand glowed again. With a mighty slam against the ground, he unleashed a shockwave that took down all the ghouls surrounding him. Red was starting to understand how his new hands worked, even if they were bizarre. Misty and Hitch were still alive, and so was Michael, though he had lost both his arm and leg. Thanks to Misty's warp ability, they had escaped the explosion's impact. Hitch was furious, blaming Misty for not using her warp ability quickly enough. He slapped her as punishment and demanded to know if she could sense the blood crystal. Unfortunately, she couldn't, because Red had injected his blood with coagulant. Frustrated, Hitch ordered Misty to wrap and take Michael's body to their leader. They needed to see if they could find something useful in his brain. Red returned home, desperately hoping to find Jean. As he stepped inside, memories flooded back of Jean making him his favorite coffee. But now that she was gone, he hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Red noticed a glow coming from his bag. It was his phone. He quickly grabbed it, hoping to contact Jean, but there was no answer. Then, he remembered he had a video message from her that he hadn't watched yet. In the video, Jin looked upset at first for his tardiness, but her expression softened as she forgave him, knowing he must have been helping someone. She confessed her love for him and said she would be waiting for him at Sky Park. With newfound determination, Red decided to head to Sky Park, where the meteor had fallen. He believed with all his heart that Jean was still alive, and he had to find her. Inside Sky Park, the Pursuer and his friend were alive and wreaking havoc. The Pursuer, now in a powerful new form, was draining the blood from the girls around him. His friend rushed in to report that the operation was complete, but things were about to get even crazier. Inside the park, there was a mother crystal, and a group of doctors worked tirelessly under the Pursuer's orders. It became clear that the Pursuer was the mastermind behind everything happening so far. They were trying to find a way to break through the barrier surrounding the mother crystal. In the center of the operation was a girl referred to as a doll. When energy was injected into her, a massive fire beam shot from her head toward the barrier. However, despite their efforts, the barrier showed no signs of damage. Frustrated, Angel, one of the Pursuer's subordinates, ordered an increase in power. Even when they maxed out the energy, the barrier remained unscathed. The doll's body began to break under the strain, but Angel pushed on, increasing the energy once more. Just as they were about to stop, the Pursuer intervened. He leaped forward, enhancing his hand, and struck the barrier with such force that it not only penetrated the barrier, but also destroyed the building behind it. After all the chaos, the barrier around the mother crystal remained untouched. It was clear that their plan all along was to draw the meteor to Earth to get their hands on that crystal. The Pursuer's friend chimed in, revealing that the shard would be the key to unlocking the mother crystal. He also shared some grim news. Zod was dead, and there was no word on Hitch yet. Angel, clearly not pleased, ordered his subordinate to retrieve the core from the doll's body and dispose of her. Just then, Misty arrived, dragging Michael's body behind her. The Master was furious, as Hitch had yet to retrieve the blood crystal from Red. Angel recognized Michael's face and saw an opportunity. He intended to dig into Michael's brain for any useful information. The Pursuer's friend reminded everyone that the princess would be arriving soon, so they needed to have everything ready. Their ultimate goal? To claim Earth as their own and turn humans into their food. The Master informed his vampire army that a ritual would be held upon the princess's arrival. He ordered them to gather sacrifices, humans, to be precise. The stage was set for a dark and deadly plan. Red was getting close to Sky Park, leaping from one building to another. As he made his way, he saw people fleeing in panic. Vampires were attacking, paralyzing their victims to prepare them for the ritual. There were 3 vampires in total, and while a few people and a SWAT agent managed to escape, one of the vampires quickly caught up with them. The SWAT agent shot the vampire in the head, but it was no use. The vampire healed instantly. With a powerful slam on the ground, the vampire paralyzed everyone around him. One girl tried to hide inside a store, but the vampire effortlessly tracked her down. Just as they were about to drain her blood, Red swooped in. With a swift motion, he conjured his gun and took out one of the vampires without breaking a sweat. He wasn't going to let anyone else get hurt. The chief vampire aimed to paralyze Red, but he was too quick. He dodged her shots and lunged forward, using his hand to stab her. She thought she could recover, but Red didn't hold back. He slashed her in half. Then, the big vampire charged at him. They engaged in a fierce fist fight, each one trying to overpower the other. The vampire thought he had the upper hand when he clenched Red's hand tightly. But this was all part of Red's plan. Using his ability, Red absorbed the vampire's prosthetic arm, turning it against him. With a swift move, Red used the arm to finish off the vampire, saving the young lady in the process. After defeating the vampires, Red pulled out a picture of Jean and asked the survivors if they had seen her. Sadly, no one had any information. But the young lady he saved had a lead. She mentioned that a SWAT agent had said survivors were gathering at the central station. Red decided to check Sky Park first and then head to the central station. Before he left, he warned them to avoid 21st Street when heading south because it was swarming with ghouls. The young lady wanted him to come with them, pointing out that Sky Park had turned into a nest for ghouls and vampires. As Red was leaving, a SWAT agent noticed the petrification on his hand and aimed his gun at him. He didn't pull the trigger but made it clear that Red couldn't join them. Just before he departed, the young lady started screaming, thanking him for saving her life. The young lady, the SWAT agent, and a few survivors were making their way to the central station, carefully avoiding the main streets. The young lady expressed her regret for not bringing Red along. The SWAT agent reminded her that once the petrification starts, it's only a matter of time before someone turns into a ghoul. He then wondered how Red managed to defeat the vampires so easily. The young lady recounted how Red conjured a gun made of blood and took them down. But just then, Hitch overheard their conversation. In a brutal move, he killed the SWAT agent and the other survivors, leaving the young lady alive. He ordered her to share more about the man who could create a weapon with his hand, sealing her fate as he did so. Red was about 4 kilometers away from Sky Park, ready to cross the bridge ahead. Just then, Elda arrived and finally found him. Dr. Angel was furious. The Mother Crystal was rejecting him, and he needed a new doll. He stormed into the storage room, where multiple females were trapped in capsules. It was clear Angel had been experimenting on them for a long time. Finally, he found his new doll, number 13, a strong woman with ginger hair. Noticing Misty's disheveled appearance, he asked if Hitch had done that to her. Misty nodded, explaining that she made a mistake and Hitch punished her for it. Hearing her refer to Hitch as her master made Angel angry. With a sinister smile, he patted her head and said, "I'm the one who created your flesh and blood. I showed mercy to a defective doll like you." He then demanded to know who her master was. Trembling, Misty replied, "My only master is you, Dr. Angel." Satisfied, he ordered her to return to Hitch while he prepared to extract information from Michael. As Misty made her way back to Hitch, she passed a room filled with the remains of useless dolls, humans who had been burned. Overwhelmed with sorrow, she began to cry, hating what she was a part of. In her despair, she silently pleaded for help. Red was crossing a bridge when he stumbled upon multiple dead SWAT agents. Pushing forward, he found Hitch waiting for him. Hitch pointed out that he had come to take the blood crystal lodged in Red's head. Red, concerned about Michael's fate, asked what had happened to him. When Hitch remained silent, Red's aura flared up, and Hitch responded in kind. A showdown was about to begin. Both Red and Hitch conjured their guns, but Hitch was quicker. He aimed and shot at Red's arm, disarming him. Red didn't back down. Using his giant hand, he launched a powerful counterattack that covered a wide area. But Hitch was nimble, leaping into the air to dodge the strike. He fired again, and though Red used his blood shield to block the shot, it wasn't enough. Hitch's bullets pierced through, creating a massive explosion that sent Red flying. Without missing a beat, Hitch dashed forward, ready to take another shot. Hitch kept firing, but Red quickly conjured his shield to block the shots. Thinking fast, Red unleashed slashes from his other hand to catch Hitch off guard. However, Hitch dodged them effortlessly and retaliated by shooting at Red's arm again. Red refused to back down, launching more slashes, but Hitch destroyed them with his gun. The battle heated up, with Red on the attack and Hitch countering every move. Then, Hitch ordered the ghouls to swarm Red. Jumping backward to dodge them, Red conjured his gun to counterattack. But to his shock, he realized these ghouls were the very ones he had saved earlier. Torn, Red hesitated. But with no other choice, he had to take them down. In a desperate move, Red lunged to shoot Hitch. But Hitch quickly used the young lady he saved as a shield. Though she hadn't transformed into a ghoul yet, the petrification was already spreading through her body. With this opening, Hitch shot her, and the bullet went through, hitting Red as well. As she lay there, the young lady apologized to Red for getting him shot, and just like that, she died. Anguish flooded Red as he shouted, "Why are you doing this?" Hitch, with a cold demeanor, stomped on Red's head and sneered, "Humans exist only to be our cattle." But in a moment of determination, as Hitch continued to stomp, Red conjured his prosthetic arm and unleashed a counterattack, blasting at Hitch. However, Hitch was quick, dodging the attack by stepping back. Fueled by anger, Red let out a dark laugh and began hurling cars at Hitch, who shot each one to pieces. But Red had a plan. He charged forward through the chaos, and though Hitch hit him midair, Red didn't stop. He managed to grab Hitch's gun. Trying to absorb it, Red was hit with a shock as it didn't work. Hitch sneered and shot Red at close range, explaining, "This isn't just any gun. It's my blood." Realizing just how dangerous Red's power was, Hitch decided this fight had to end for good. Just when it looked like Hitch was about to finish Red off, Elda swooped in, riding up on her scooter like it was no big deal. With a quick move, she froze Hitch in his tracks, saving Red from certain death. Without wasting a second, they both took off, making their escape before Hitch could break free. Hitch wasn't letting them escape so easily. He was right behind them, firing relentlessly. Red tried to counter with his blood weapon, but he was running low on strength from all the blood he'd lost. Just as Hitch powered up his gun and shot, it hit hard, shattering the ground beneath them and sending them flying toward the ocean. Elda quickly reacted, creating an icy path just in time to keep them from plunging into the water. But Hitch wasn't giving up. He was already there, blocking their way forward. Hitch fired again, but Red threw up his blood shield, covering Elda. Hitch was right on their tail, getting closer with every second. That's when Elda spotted an oil tanker up ahead. She had a plan. "Put your hand on the ground," she shouted. Red followed her lead, and Elda slid them right under the tanker, freezing the ground behind them to slow Hitch down. Without missing a beat, Red aimed and fired at the tanker. Boom! A massive explosion erupted, creating a fiery barrier between them and Hitch. Elda couldn't resist taunting Hitch even with blood trickling from her nose. But then, bam! Misty arrived out of nowhere, shattering the ice, trapping Hitch and going straight for Red and Elda. Red threw up his blood shield, but Misty's slash tore right through it. She struck again, and Elda took the hit with her arm. Just enough time for Red to counter and push Misty back. But Red's strength was fading fast. He'd lost too much blood, and the petrification was creeping in. Sensing the danger, Elda bolted forward, trying to get them away. Misty, who seemed weak before, was proving her strength now, while Hitch was boiling with rage over his close call. Things were only getting more intense. Typical Hitch, he didn't even thank Misty for saving him. Instead, he punched her, furious that she didn't go after Red and Elda immediately. With his left arm missing, he had another twisted plan. With a creepy grin, he bit Misty and drained her blood to regrow his arm. Red and Elda were just a kilometer from Sky Park, but the path ahead was packed with ghouls. In their weakened state, one wrong move could mean the end. Taking cover in a nearby building, Red and Elda faced a harsh reality. Red's petrification was getting worse, and the coagulant wasn't enough to stop it anymore. Elda noticed the destroyed laptop that Michael left with Red, triggering a memory of what Dr. Sarah had explained. That laptop held the critical data on relic transplants, research that could fuse relic powers with human bodies. But the operation had already been a success, with Red as the living result. Determined to keep Red alive, Elda offered her hand for him to absorb her blood. In his weakened state, Red instinctively bit into her hand, taking in what he needed. When he came to, he realized what he'd done and was flooded with guilt, recalling how he'd lost control with Michael in a similar way. He blamed himself for Michael's death, unaware that Michael was actually still alive. Red, worried Elda might turn into a vampire after giving him her blood, asked if she was at risk. Elda reassured him that she wouldn't since she's different. When Red questioned why they were protecting him, she clarified it wasn't just him. It was the relics fused with him that mattered. Humanity's survival depended on those relics. After all, Red, grateful, thanked her for saving him. But Elda couldn't shake a nagging thought. Why were the vampires bothering to turn so many humans into ghouls when they couldn't even feed off them? Before they could explore the question, Hitch showed up, grabbing Red by the head with his newly reinforced arm, ready to continue the fight. Elda wanted to help Red fight Hitch, but Misty swooped in and threw Elda from the building to the ground below. As she fell, Elda called out to Red, urging him to use the blood she'd given him. Realizing she was about to be swarmed by ghouls, Elda quickly activated her warp ability to escape, but Misty was already prepared for a showdown. Meanwhile, inside Sky Park, the Master and Dr. Angel were deep in conversation. Angel explained that with the Mother Crystal's core providing infinite energy and the cerebral controller, the Master would have absolute control over the ghouls. They'd be a growing army, unstoppable by guns or swords, ready to follow the Queen's every command. Back in the battle, Hitch was inches away from crushing Red's skull when Red remembered Elda's words. Why not use Xisto, the powerful relic embedded in his legs? Drawing on Xisto's power, Red countered, slicing into Hitch and forcing him backward. Now, with his newfound strength and his legs powered up, Red was more than ready to pick up the fight right where they'd left off. Elda was on the run, trying to find cover from the ghouls hot on her heels. But Misty was right behind her, ready to strike. Elda managed to dodge Misty's first few attacks, mocking her along the way. Frustrated, Misty unleashed a powerful beam that sent Elda crashing to the ground. But quick-thinking Elda used her frozen hands to cushion the blow and then countered with ice shards. Misty sliced through the shards, but Elda seized the moment to lunge forward, transforming her hand into an ice spear and launching an attack that sent Misty crashing into a nearby building. Elda wasn't finished yet. She conjured an ice fog to blind Misty. As the fog thickened, Elda taunted Misty, comparing the necklace around her neck to a collar on a dog. She told a story about a poor dog that wagged its tail despite being beaten, only to realize it was a wolf with the power to fight back. Elda suggested that Misty was stuck in a similar situation. From behind the cover of the fog, Elda threw more ice shards at Misty, who easily cut them down. But that attack was just a distraction. Elda quickly dropped Misty's sword, leaving her weaponless and trapped. It was checkmate. Elda didn't kill Misty because, in a way, they were the same. Just like Elda, Misty was a clone, an artificial being made from human bodies and vampire blood. They were like dolls, created to serve a purpose, only to be incinerated once their usefulness was gone. Even though they felt pain and fear and had a desire to live, they had no real choice. They were creations of someone else. Misty trembled as she confessed she couldn't disobey because she was born to serve. Elda, furious at Misty's acceptance of this fate, told her to just give up and live in despair, like the dog she was compared to. Misty, tears in her eyes, insisted she didn't want to die. She wanted to live life on her own terms. Elda confronted her directly. Whether they were clones, humans, or dolls didn't matter. Misty wanted to know how Elda had freed herself. Elda told her it was something Misty had to do for herself because relying on someone else was just another form of imprisonment. With a smile, she encouraged Misty, saying it didn't matter how she was born. What truly mattered was how she chose to live her life. As Red fought against Hitch, he remembered Elda's words about blood weapons. She had explained that these weapons are unlike any other. They are living organisms that respond to their master's will. The purer the blood, the stronger the weapon becomes. Elda reassured him that with her special blood now inside him, things would feel different. With his new legs, Red was quick enough to dodge all of Hitch's shots. Then, seizing the moment, he countered with his gun. This time, he fired a single shot that cleanly severed Hitch's arm, all thanks to Elda's blood enhancing his strength. But Hitch wasn't finished yet. He transformed, sprouting 4 powerful arms, each equipped with deadly claws. As Hitch lunged at him, Red relied on his speed, deftly running and avoiding the oncoming strikes. As Red leaped high into the air, Hitch quickly moved behind him, aiming to strike. But Red was ready. He performed a backflip and slashed at Hitch's arm. However, Hitch instantly regenerated and caught Red, slamming him hard to the ground. Just when it seemed Hitch would finish Red off, Elda jumped in to help. She took a hit from Hitch but quickly used her freeze ability to immobilize him. This distraction gave Red the chance he needed to break free. He rushed over and absorbed the tank's cannon, gearing up for a powerful counterattack. With a booming blast, Red aimed the cannon and blew Hitch away. The blast was so powerful that it left no time for Hitch to regenerate. As he turned his head, he saw Misty. Relief washed over him. She had returned, but that relief quickly turned to despair as she left him to die. And just like that, Hitch was reduced to a splat of blood. Red's crystal blood began to manifest, and he started hearing Jean's voice. Inside the Sky Park, the Crystal Mother was sending out energy signals in a pattern. Jean, trapped within the crystal, was calling out for Red to come to her. This moment took Red back to a memory. The day the meteor was about to crash into Earth. He remembered Jean looking out the window, completely unafraid, as if she already knew what was coming. Red approached her and kissed her, asking if she ever thought about having a child and whether she wanted a boy or a girl. "I don't mind," he said, "as long as they're nothing like me." Jean smiled and replied that, of course, she wanted them to be just like him. Red charged into the Sky Park, ready to confront the danger ahead. As vampires began shooting at him, he unleashed his cannon, annihilating them one by one. Elda followed closely, urging him to return to Sarah for help. She worried that in his current state, he might not survive. Red appreciated her concern, but remained determined to push forward. As he approached the rooftop where he last saw Jean, memories flooded back. He remembered the chaos after the meteor fell. The Crystal Mother had fused with Jean, transforming her into a vampire. In a desperate attempt to save Red from his injuries, she cracked one of her blood crystals on her head and threw it toward him. The crystal hit Red, fusing with him and ultimately keeping him alive. Now, he understood. Jean was trapped inside the Crystal Mother all along. Finally reaching the rooftop, Red found the Master waiting for him, a confrontation looming on the horizon. The moment Red stepped onto the rooftop, the Master recognized him instantly. With a confident smile, he declared they had unfinished business. Without wasting a second, Red aimed his blood cannon and fired at the Master. But the Master was quick. He transformed and countered with a powerful blood beam from his eye. Thinking fast, Red raised his shield to reflect the beam, protecting himself from the attack. But the Master didn't let up. He charged forward and threw a punch at Red, who managed to block it just in time. Now, the battle escalated as the two began clashing, using their fangs and skills to gain the upper hand. It was a fierce confrontation, each strike echoing the intensity of their rivalry. Red found himself overwhelmed by the Master's immense strength. The Master smirked, revealing his plan to establish a new empire that would suit the new world. But just when it seemed all hope was lost, Red felt a surge of energy from Jean inside the crystal. Harnessing this newfound power, Red unleashed a powerful lightning ability, striking the Master with a fierce bolt. But he didn't stop there. Red then manifested a gigantic blood arm and hurled it down toward the Master. In response, the Master poured every ounce of his energy into his eye beam, determined to counter the attack. But in a dramatic clash of power, Red emerged victorious, proving that he wasn't done fighting just yet. While the remaining vampires guarded the central area, Elda made her move and ambushed them, successfully rescuing Michael. The Master was determined to take down Red with one final attack. But in a shocking twist, Red bit the Master, draining his blood instantly. Just when it seemed like the Master was done for, his friend rushed in to help. But Red wasn't finished yet. He hurled the Master at his friend and unleashed his electric ability, shocking them both. With the chaos settling, Red moved toward the Mother Crystal, and that's when Jean emerged from it. Jean was overjoyed to see Red, but suddenly, the Master's friend cut the cables linking her to the Crystal Mother. Jean began to suffocate, gasping in pain. The Master's friend then teleported away with Dr. Angel, the Master, and half of the Crystal Mother. As the remaining half of the Crystal Mother was about to explode, Elda, despite her miserable state, attempted to use her warp ability to save everyone. Unfortunately, she couldn't manage it. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, an unexpected figure swooped in to save them all. Red woke up screaming Jean's name, his heart racing. Thanks to Dr. Sarah, his injuries were almost healed. He learned that Misty was the one who had saved them. At the temporary command center in Central Station, SWAT soldiers were busy organizing operations. Most of the vampires had perished in the explosion, but many ghouls were still lurking around. Elda took Red to see Jean, who was inside a capsule. He rushed to free her, but Sarah stopped him, warning that if he did, she would die. Red, furious, demanded to know if she planned to treat Jean like another lab rat for her experiments. Sarah explained that Jean had fused with the crystal from the meteor and was living off its energy. Her current state was due to her severed connection with the crystal, so they had to keep her in stasis to keep her alive. Then, Sarah handed Red a box Jean had been carrying when she was at the Sky Park. Inside was an engagement ring he wanted to give her and baby shoes. Sarah revealed the shocking news that Jean was pregnant and that, thankfully, the child seemed to be okay. Overwhelmed with emotion, Red broke down in tears. As the SWAT team cleared out the remaining ghouls, Red made his way back to his store. There, he found the old man who owned the shop next to him, along with Saya, still alive. The old man was overjoyed to see Red safe and immediately asked about Jean. Exhausted, Red promised he would explain everything later. Fast forward a few months, and Red was now working in his bar, with Saya helping him out. But Saya looked sad, still waiting for her mother to return. Red hadn't told her what happened yet. To cheer her up, he made her a burger, knowing how much she loved them. While she ate, she held on to hope that her mother would come back. Suddenly, Red received a call from Elda. She informed him they had found a shard located within a ghost. To save Jean, Red and his new friends would need to collect all the blood crystals. Meanwhile, in the Carpathian Mountains of Romania, the queen of all vampires confronted the master. His friend arrived, announcing that Dr. Angel had completed the preparations. And here's the real twist. The queen of vampires was Jean herself. How this happened and whether it was real or an illusion remains a mystery. With that revelation, our story comes to a close.